My name is Nadia Okafor, and I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. I am not a dramatic person. I am not someone who chases conflict. I am an occupational therapist. I spend my days helping people relearn how to button their shirts, how to hold a fork, how to walk from the bedroom to the bathroom without falling. I am trained professionally to stay calm, to observe, to document, to not flinch. Like and subscribe the channel and comment from where are you watching. And I am telling you this because what I'm about to describe, what happened to my mother, what my sister did, what I found inside a manila envelope on a Tuesday afternoon in March, nearly broke me in a way that 11 years of clinical work could not have prepared me for when the story ends. And it does end. I promise you that I will be standing in my mother's kitchen, the one on Clearfield Avenue in Columbus, the one with the yellow curtains she sewed herself in 1987, and I will be holding something in my hands, something small, and I will understand finally what was taken from me and what was not. But first, you need to know who she was. You need to know who my mother was before any of this happened, because this story is not about money. It was never about money, even when it looked like it was. Asterisk. This is about what happens when a daughter decides that her mother's love was a resource to be extracted. And what happened when I decided to stop her. Asterisk. My mother's name was Adaeze Okafor. She went by Ada, and she was, I'm going to try to say this precisely, because I don't want to sentimentalize her. She was a woman who understood the weight of things, not just physical things, though she understood those too. She could feel the quality of fabric between two fingers and tell you immediately whether it was worth the price. She could taste a stew and tell you which spice had been added too early. She could walk into a room and know, within minutes, who was the loneliest person in it. She came to Columbus, Ohio from Enugu, Nigeria in 1979. She was 23 years old. She had a cousin here, a suitcase, and $200 that she'd saved from 3 years of work at a textile shop. That was it. No family behind her to catch her if she fell. No husband yet. No children. She found a room in a boarding house on the east side of Columbus. She got a job at a laundry service on 5th Avenue. Within 8 months, she'd been promoted to shift supervisor. Within 2 years, she'd saved enough to put a deposit on a small apartment on Clearfield Avenue. By the time I was born, I am the younger of 2 daughters. And I arrived in 1985. When my mother was 29, the apartment had become a house. A small one, 3 bedrooms, mustard yellow siding that she repainted herself one summer with my sister Renata and their friend Gloria Teta from next door. My mother had married my father, Bernard Okafor, a soft-spoken accountant who loved jazz and made the best pepper soup I have ever tasted. He died of a heart attack in 1994. When I was 9 and Renata was 14, that is when everything shifted, not in a dramatic way. Not in the way that grief shatters some families. My mother was not someone who shattered. She grieved. I saw her grieve. I saw her sit in the kitchen at 2 in the morning with a cup of tea she wasn't drinking, just holding it, staring out the yellow curtains, but she did not fall apart. She did not drink. She did not disappear into her sadness. She got up every morning. She packed our lunches. She went to her job at the hospital supply company where she'd become an office manager. She made sure Renata's college applications went out on time in 1997. She told me once, when I was maybe 15 or 16, what she believed about hardship. Nadia, she said. She was braiding my hair, her fingers moving quickly, efficiently. The way she did everything. Suffering is not the enemy. Suffering is just weather. The question is only what you build that can stand in the rain. I have thought about that sentence every day for the last 3 years, because what my mother built, the house, the savings, the small investment account she maintained quietly for 30 years, those were the things my sister Renata decided she was entitled to. All of it, exclusively, but I am getting ahead of myself. We were talking about who my mother was. We need to stay there for a moment longer. Because you cannot understand what was lost without first understanding what existed. Asterisk. My mother was generous in specific ways. Not showy generous. Not ostentatious. She would arrive at a family gathering and press an envelope into the hand of whoever needed it most, without announcement, without ceremony. She kept a list in a small notebook, people she was praying for, people she was watching, people she thought might need help soon. She was always 3 steps ahead of a crisis. She loved music. Nigerian highlife mostly, but also Stevie Wonder. Celine Dion in her guilty pleasure phase in the 90s, and inexplicably a bit of Dolly Parton. She sang in the kitchen. She sang quietly to herself, not performing, just expressing something that didn't have words. She was funny. People forget to say that about mothers who are strong. She was very, very funny. Dry, quick, and absolutely precise. She once described a pompous man at her church with a single sentence that made me spit water across the table. I won't repeat it because I'm still laughing. She was not perfect. She could be controlling in the way that women who have had to be self-reliant often are. She struggled to ask for help, even when she needed it. She had a stubborn streak that ran so deep it sometimes looked like pride when it was actually just fear. Fear of being a burden. Fear of being seen as weak. She and Renata clashed about this, sometimes badly, in ways I didn't fully understand as a child, but she loved us. Both of us, equally. I need you to hear that, because my sister has told a different story, has told anyone who would listen that our mother had a favorite. And Thefilray was me. It isn't true. My mother was scrupulously fair to the point of occasionally driving both of us crazy. She bought us the same birthday cakes at the same bakery for years. She kept both of our childhood report cards in the same drawer. She attended every one of Renata's school plays and every one of my volleyball games with the same energy and the same camera, Renata's story. The one she told to explain what she did. The one she still tells, I'm sure, to this day, depends on you believing that she was owed more. That she was overlooked. That she sacrificed more. It isn't true. But that's the thing about a story told by someone who believes their own lies. They've told it so many times, in so many versions, that it has acquired the texture of truth in their own mind. My mother's name was Adaeze. She went by Ada. She built something real from nothing, and my sister decided it belonged to her. You need to meet my sister properly, because I don't want you to hate her too early. That would be too easy. And it would miss something important about how this kind of damage actually works. Renata Okafor. She added the marsh when she married. Derek in 2008 is 11 years older than me. Which means that by the time I was forming real memories of our family, Renata was already becoming an adult. I grew up watching her from a distance that felt much larger than 11 years. She was a teenager when I was a toddler. She was in college when I was in elementary school. She was married and living in her own house in Westerville by the time I was in high school. What I knew of her as a child was mostly impression, not intimacy. She was tall, like our mother. She had our mother's bearing, that upright, deliberate way of moving that communicated she knew where she was going. She was ambitious in a specific way. She wanted comfort. She wanted security. She wanted to be seen as successful. Not famous, not rich famous. Just solidly, visibly successful. The kind of house, the kind of car, the kind of handbag that communicated, I made it. She became a regional sales manager for a pharmaceutical supply company. She was good at it, or at least she was for a while. She had a talent for performance, for adjusting to her audience, for saying the right thing. Derek Marsh is from Dayton. He sells commercial vac systems. He is the kind of man who fills a room with a big personality and a loud laugh and leaves you afterward somehow remembering nothing specific about him. He was pleasant in the early years. He called my mother Mama Ada, which she tolerated with visible good humor.
He came to Christmas.
He fixed things around the house when he came, which she appreciated. I am telling you all of this because I need you to understand. For most of my adult life, my relationship with Renata was functional. Not close. We had never really been close. The age gap was too wide for that, but functional. We were sisters in the administrative sense. We called on birthdays. We attended the same family events. We were polite. We spoke well of each other to our mother. I want to be precise about when this changed. Because it didn't change all at once. It changed in layers. The first layer was in 2018. That was the year our mother started forgetting things. Asterisk, the first sign I noticed was small. I was visiting for the weekend. I came down from Columbus to her house on Clearfield Avenue about once a month, and she asked me twice in the same afternoon what I wanted for dinner. The second time, she asked it as if the first time hadn't happened. She didn't pause. She didn't look uncertain. She just asked it as if knew I noted it. I filed it. I told myself she's 62. She's tired. She works too hard. This is nothing. The second sign was a few months later. She told me a story about an argument she'd had with her neighbor, Gloria. It was a vivid story, specific and funny, with the kind of detail she always brought to storytelling. 2 weeks later, she told me the same story again, word for word, with the same vivid detail, as if for the first time. I sat there and listened. I said at the end, "Mom, you told me that already." She looked at me, not embarrassed, not dismissive. She looked at me with something closer to surprise, and then, very quickly, something I did not know how to name at the time. Something quiet and inward. Something she put away before I could read it fully. Did I? She said, "Yes, about 2 weeks ago." She said. And then, well, it was still a good story. Asterisk, and she changed the subject. I called Renata about it. This is important. I want you to know that, in the beginning, I tried to do this properly, together, as sisters. I think there might be something going on with Mom's memory, I told her. I want to get her to a neurologist. There was a pause on Renata's end. Then she said, "Nadia, you're being dramatic." She's fine. She's been managing this house and her own life for 30 years without anyone's help. Don't make a problem where there isn't one. I pushed back. I told her about the repeated stories. The double dinner question. All old people do that, Renata said. Leave her alone. She doesn't need to be poked and prodded. I let it go. For a few more months, I let it go. In March of 2019. I took my mother to see Dr. Felicia Adaeze at Ohio Health Neurology. This was a decision I made alone, because by then I had stopped asking my sister's permission to care for our mother. The results of the cognitive testing were not a surprise to me. By that point, they still hurt. Mild cognitive impairment, possibly early Alzheimer's. Too early to be certain. Too present to be ignored. Dr. Adaeze gave us a folder with resources. She explained what the next few years might look like, in gentle clinical language that I translated internally with all the specificity of my professional training. I knew exactly what she was describing. I had seen it in my patients. The erosion. The slow, specific, devastating erasure of a person while the body continues to function. I sat in the parking lot of that neurology office with my mother, and we did not speak for a while. Then she reached across and put her hand on mine and said, "Don't look like that." "I'm not looking like anything," I said. "You're looking like you're going to carry this yourself," she said. "Don't." I called Renata that evening. I told her the diagnosis. This time, the pause was longer. "Okay," Renata said finally. "I'll come down next weekend." Asterisk, she did. She came, and she sat across the kitchen table from our mother, and they talked. I do not know exactly what was said. I was not in the room for most of it. What I do know is that when Renata left on Sunday afternoon, she hugged our mother for a long time, and our mother looked afterward like she had been comforted. And Renata looked like a woman who had just realized something. I did not know yet what she'd realized. I found out 2 years later. Asterisk. The changes were so gradual that I keep wanting to tell this part of the story wrong, to compress it. To say suddenly or one day when the truth is that it was more like watching a painting fade. You don't notice the exact moment a color goes. You just notice, eventually, that the room looks different. Summer of 2019. I'm visiting. My mother mentions casually that Renata has been coming by every other weekend. This is new. I feel shamefully a flash of something, not quite jealousy, but close to it. An older, complicated feeling from childhood. I push it away. That's good, I say. I'm glad she's spending time with you. She's been very helpful, my mother says. She helped me go through some papers. What papers? Old things, insurance, the accounts. She said she was making sure everything was organized. I pause. I am careful with my pause, the way I'm careful at work when a patient says something that changes the clinical picture. What accounts, Mom? The investment account, she says. She said something about making sure it was in order. She's better with finances than you are, you know. She knows about those things. I want to say, actually, Renata is not better with finances than I am. I want to say I have a 401k and 0 credit card debt and have paid my own rent since I was 22. I want to say, what does going through the accounts mean? I say, that sounds good. Was it helpful? She's such a good girl, my mother says. She worries about me. Asterisk, I drive home to Columbus. I think about the investment account. My mother had built it steadily over 30 years, contributions from her salary, conservative reinvestment, patient maintenance. I know it existed because she'd mentioned it to me years ago when discussing her retirement. She never told me the exact figure. She kept her finances private with a dignity that I had always respected. I call Renata. Hey, she says, breezy. How was the visit? Mom mentioned you helped her organize her financial accounts. Oh, yeah. She was confused about some of the statements and I helped her sort through them. No big deal. What was she confused about? A tiny pause. Just the account balances. She kept thinking the numbers were wrong. She was comparing old statements to new ones and getting upset. I helped her understand it. Is she okay? She's fine. She's great, honestly. She just needed some help understanding the paperwork. Another pause. Nadia, you don't need to be paranoid about everything. She's our mother. I'm allowed to help her. I know, I say. Of course.
I hang up.
I stare at the ceiling of my apartment. I am not paranoid. I am a trained clinical professional. I know the difference between appropriate family support and financial isolation of a cognitively impaired adult. I know this intellectually. I am not ready to say that's what's happening. Because the gap between knowing something professionally and applying that knowledge to your own. Family is a gap so wide it might as well be the Grand Canyon. But I begin to document, asterisk not dramatically. Not because I think I'm building a legal case. Just because I am an occupational therapist and documentation is my habit. I start keeping a notes document on my phone. Dates, times, things my mother says. Things Renata says. Discrepancies between them. October 2019, Mom says. She doesn't remember what she discussed with Renata about the house. She said I signed something, my mother says. Some kind of form. She laughs it off. I sign things all the time. I'm always signing something. I stop. What did you sign, Mom? She waves her hand. Something official. About the house? I don't remember exactly. But Renata explained it. I go home and write that down. November 2019. My mother's neighbor Gloria Teta calls me. She has had my number for 20 years. She calls it maybe once every few years for genuine emergencies. Your mother seems confused, Gloria says carefully. She told me last week she's getting things organized for what's next. I asked what she meant and she looked at me like she wasn't sure. I don't know, Nadia, I'm just telling you. December 2019, Christmas at the Clearfield Avenue house. Renata and Derek are there. Derek is expansive, charming, pulling out his big laugh at every opportunity. He brings a very expensive bottle of red wine. He hugs my mother and calls her Mama Ada. He and Renata stay through Christmas Day and into the 26th. I leave Christmas evening because I have a shift on the 2/7 dot as I am leaving. I am putting on my coat in the hallway, and I hear Renata and Derek in the kitchen. Their voices are low, but the house has always been acoustically strange. Sound travels oddly, bounces off the plaster walls in unexpected ways. My mother is in the living room watching television. I hear Derek say, "It needs to be done before spring." And Renata, I know, I'll handle it." I stand in the hallway for a moment. My coat half on, Then I hear my mother's laugh from the living room. The television has said something funny, and the kitchen goes quiet. I leave. I sit in my car in the driveway for a longer time than I should before driving home. I write in my notes document. It needs to be done before spring. Derek. February 2020. I visit. My mother is having a good day. She's sharp, funny, making a goosey soup from memory. We sit at the kitchen table. She asks about my patients. I tell her a story, anonymized, about a man who relearned to play guitar after a stroke, and her eyes are full. I'm glad you do what you do, she says. I'm glad too. Asterisk, she is quiet for a while. The soup simmers. Then, Renata tells me I should put her on the accounts. I keep my face neutral. This is a skill I have practiced for 11 years in clinical settings, and I am grateful for it now. What do you mean? I ask, the bank account and the investment account. As a joint holder. She says it's for safety, so that if something happens to me, everything is taken care of. That's one option, I say carefully. But there are other ways to handle that, Mom. A financial power of attorney, for example. Or putting a beneficiary designation on the accounts. Adding a joint account holder is different. It gives someone access to the money while you're still alive. My mother nods. She stirs the soup. She said you wouldn't understand it, my mother says. She said you're not good with financial things. I breathe in. Mom, I want to ask you something, and I want you to hear it the way I mean it, which is with love. Is there anything about your finances you want to talk to me about? Anything you're worried about? She looks at me. For a moment, she is completely, fully present. The woman she has always been, sharp and direct and completely herself. I trust Renata, she says. She's my firstborn. She has always been very responsible. I nod. She turns. Back to the soup. I write it down when I get home. Asterisk March 2021. I want to be specific about the sequence of events because it still matters to me to have it. RIGHT. I was visiting on a Saturday. My mother was having what I would have described as a medium day. She was a little foggy in the morning, clearer by early afternoon. We had lunch together. She wanted to watch a program on television. I sat with her, and about midway through, she fell asleep in her chair the way she sometimes did, deeply and quickly. Like a light switched off, I went to the kitchen to clean up. Then, because I had been watching the household with a clinician's eye for 2 years by that point, I did something I had not allowed myself to do before. I opened the drawer in the hallway bureau where my mother had always kept important papers. I told myself I just wanted to check on things. Make sure her insurance was current, that there were no bills she'd forgotten to pay. This was a thing I had started doing, gently, trying not to be intrusive, just checking. Her capacity varied from day to day, and there had been a water bill she'd nearly let go to collections. And I'd caught it. The insurance folder was there. The vehicle registration. An old passport. And near the back of the drawer, tucked into a larger manila envelope I had not seen before, with Renata's handwriting on the front. Legal Mom. I stood in the hallway and I looked at that envelope for a long time. Then I opened it. The first document was a power of attorney. Signed by my mother, notarized. It named Renata Okafor Marsh as sole agent with full authority over my mother's financial affairs. Signed August 14th, 2019. I had not known about this document. I had not been told about this document. My mother had not mentioned it to me in any specific way, the signing something. Official in October 2019 was the only reference she'd ever made to it. The second document was a joint account agreement from Heartland Bank, adding Renata as co-owner of my mother's primary checking account. Dated November 2020. The third document was what stopped me completely. It was a new will. Signed and notarized on February 7th, 2021. 40 days before I was standing in this hallway. I read it 3 times before the words settled. The will left the house on Clearfield Avenue, valued at approximately $187,000. Entirely to Renata Okafor Marsh. The investment account, which I now saw for the first time, was valued at $243,000, also entirely to Renata. OKFOA-marsh. The personal property, the furniture, the jewelry. The contents of the house, entirely to Renata OKAFOR-marsh. To Nadia Okafor, the will left. A small savings account containing $4,200, a specific set of dishes my mother had always called the company plates, and a sentence. I love my daughter Nadia and am grateful for her care. I lowered the papers. The house was quiet. My mother was asleep in her chair. I could hear, from inside the living room, the faint sound of the television program still running. A laugh track. Something bright and incongruous. I'm not a person who cries easily. I sat down on the floor of the hallway, just sat down, right there on the hardwood, and I held those papers in my hands and I tried to understand what I was looking at. This was February 2021. My mother, according to Dr. Adaeze's assessments, had been living with moderate cognitive impairment since at least late 2019. She had days of relative clarity and days of significant confusion. I knew this. I had documented this. I had attended every medical appointment that she allowed me to attend. This will had been executed during that period. The power of attorney had been executed even earlier. When my mother's decline was first becoming apparent, I sat on the floor of the hallway for a long time. I listened to my mother's breathing from the next room. I thought about the agusi soup she'd made me in February and how sharp she'd seemed that day. I thought about the days when she called me by my father's name and asked him how work was going. I thought about Renata saying she's fine. She's great, honestly, on the phone. I thought about Derek's voice in the kitchen at Christmas. It needs to be done before spring. And then, slowly, the way something large and cold settles into you, I understood. I want to tell you that I confronted Renata immediately. I want to tell you that I did the strong, decisive thing. I was in shock. I want to be honest about that. I put the papers back. I sat with my mother until she woke up. We had tea. She told me about a dream she'd had about our father. I smiled. I helped her to bed at 9 o'clock. I drove home. I sat in my car in my parking garage for 45 minutes. I called my friend Joanna, who is not involved in this story except as the person who talked me off a ledge at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night. She said, call an attorney. Don't call Renata yet. Call an attorney first. I called Renata first. I know. I couldn't help it. It was Sunday morning. I had slept maybe 3 hours. I found some documents in Mom's bureau, I said. The new will. The POA. Silence. A different kind of silence than before. The kind of silence that means someone is calculating, not surprised. Those are Mom's personal documents, Renata said. She's allowed to have them. When was she told about the terms of the new will? I don't know what you mean. Does she know she left me $4,000 and the company plates? Mom made her own decisions. I can't control what Mom decides. Renata, she has moderate cognitive impairment. She has Alzheimer's. You know this. We both know this. She has MCI. That is not the same thing as Alzheimer's. And a diagnosis of MCI does not strip someone of their legal rights. She said this flatly, quickly, like someone who had practiced it. When did you help her make this will? I asked. I didn't help her. I drove her to the attorney's office, and I waited in the lobby. She did it herself. Which attorney? Another pause. It's none of your business. It is my business, I said. I am her daughter, and she has dementia. She does not have dementia. Renata's voice rose, just once, with a controlled anger that was familiar to me from childhood. You have always done this. You have always made everything into a crisis to make yourself the center of it. Mom is fine. She is managing her own life and she made her own choices, and you are not entitled to anything. Nadia, you are not entitled to anything just because you drive down once a month and you make yourself feel like a hero. I was quiet. Don't call me again about this, Renata said. And do not upset Mom. She hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a long time. Then I thought of something else. I thought of the power of attorney. The joint account. I thought of that investment account. $243,000, 30 years of careful saving. I thought of my mother's voice. She says it's for safety. The next day. Monday, I called my mother, *Mom. I said carefully, I want to ask you about something. Do you remember signing a new will recently? A long pause. What kind of will? A will about your estate. Your house and your accounts. Oh, she said. Yes, I think so. Renata took me somewhere. Do you know what's in it, Mom? What you wrote. I leave things to my girls, she said. That's what I've always said. To my girls. To both of us? To my girls, she repeated a little firmer. That's what I've always said. She did not remember the specific terms. She did not know. I called a third time, a week later, asking in a different way, asking if she'd spoken to a lawyer recently. Renata handles all of that, my mother said. She's very organized. I called the investment account company. They confirmed that no, they could not discuss my mother's account with me. I was not an authorized party. When I asked who was authorized, they told me they couldn't share that information. I understood then that the wall was complete. Every financial access point had been closed to me. I was looking at a structure that had been built carefully, systematically, over approximately 2 years. Not in a moment of greed. In a plan, Gloria Teta has lived at 1418 Clearfield Avenue since 1998. That makes her my mother's neighbor of 22 years. And in that time, they had become the kind of friends that are more than friends. The kind built out of proximity and small daily kindnesses and watching each other's children grow up. Gloria was at my mother's house the afternoon my father was buried. My mother was at Gloria's side when Gloria's husband, Quime, had his first stroke in 2006. I drove to Clearfield Avenue on a Saturday in April 2021. Not to see my mother. I called ahead and said I would come by later that afternoon. But first to knock on Gloria's door. Gloria Teta is 67 years old, a retired nursing assistant, a Baptist church elder, and a woman with a memory like a steel trap. She is small and round, and she dresses in colors. She was wearing an orange blouse when she opened the door. She looked at my face for about 2 seconds and said, "Come in, Nadia, I've been waiting." She sat me down at her kitchen table. She made tea. She did this efficiently, without asking if I wanted it, the way women of her generation perform care. "How long have you known?" I asked. "Known what, exactly?" she said. She was being careful about what Renata is doing. She was quiet. She set a mug in front of me. Then she sat down across from me and folded her hands on the table, and she said, "I don't like to involve myself in other people's family business." "Gloria, I know," she said. "I know." She told me this, starting in roughly mid-2019. Renata's visits to the house had become much more frequent. 2, sometimes 3 weekends a month. Gloria had noticed this because she and my mother had a standing Saturday morning routine. Coffee on my mother's porch if the weather allowed, or at Gloria's kitchen table if it didn't. Starting in the summer of 2019, this routine was repeatedly interrupted. Renata would be there, or Derek would be there doing something in the yard, and my mother would call Gloria to cancel. She'd apologize, Gloria told me. She'd say, "Renata's here and she needs my attention." I thought, good, it's good her daughter is visiting. Ada needs that. But Gloria had started to notice other things. She noticed that my mother's spending habits had changed. My mother had always been someone who kept up her house, who repainted when things needed repainting, who replaced appliances on a schedule. Starting in 2020, this stopped. The front porch started looking shabby. My mother told Gloria that Renata had said they should wait on things, and that Renata was managing the money now. Managing it how? Gloria had asked my mother. Renata says it's better centralized, my mother had told her. She says it's more efficient. Gloria noticed something else. She noticed that my mother began to seem uncertain about things she had previously been certain about. Not her memory. Gloria was careful to distinguish between the memory lapses she'd already observed and this new thing. This was different. This was uncertainty about decisions. About whether she'd done the right thing. About whether she could trust her own judgment. Ada would say to me, "Gloria, do you think I've been fair to my girls?" Gloria said, She paused. She turned her mug in her hands. She'd ask me that. And I'd say, Ada, you've been a wonderful mother to both of them. And she'd say, Renata says I was harder on her. Because she was the firstborn. She says I expected more from her and I let Nadia get away with things. And I would look at her and think, that is not Ada talking. That is not the woman I've known for 20 years. I felt something cold move through me. She was telling her that, I said. I think so. I think Renata was working on her. Gloria's voice was careful but certain. I've seen it before in my nursing work. When someone's memory is going, you can plant things in their mind. Repeat something enough times and it becomes a memory. It becomes a truth they believe they've always had. Gloria had one more thing to tell me. She had been looking out her front window one afternoon in January 2021. She specified the month clearly. She said she was sure of it because it was just after New Year's and she had seen a car she didn't recognize pull up to my mother's house. Not Renata's car. A different one. A man had come to the door, carrying a briefcase. My mother had let him in.
He'd stayed for about an hour. What did he look like?
I asked. White man, maybe 60, gray suit, briefcase, Gloria said. He came back inside. Ada signed something at the table. I could see them through the front window, and he left. February 7th, 2021. The date on the will, the attorney had come to the house. He had not made my mother go somewhere. He had come to her, which meant either my mother couldn't travel, which wasn't the case. She could still travel, or Renata had arranged it so that the signing would happen in a controlled environment. At my mother's kitchen table. With whatever framing Renata had provided, Gloria looked at me steadily. What are you going to do, Nadia? I'm going to fight it, I said. She nodded slowly. She reached across the table and she put her hand briefly over mine, the same way my mother had in the neurology parking lot 2 years earlier. She loves you, Gloria said. Whatever she signed, whatever they told her to sign. She loves you. I drove home. I called an attorney. Before I tell you what happened next, I need to tell you about one afternoon. I need to tell you this. Not because it's relevant to the legal case. It isn't. But because it is the thing I come back to when I'm struggling to understand why I kept going. It was early. May 2021, a Saturday. The weather was extraordinary, one of those Ohio spring days that feels like an apology for winter. Warm and green and smelling of cut grass and something sweet from the neighbor's flowering tree. I drove down to Clearfield Avenue and my mother was sitting on the porch when I pulled up. Just sitting in the chair she'd had for 15 years, looking at the street. She was wearing a yellow dress. She looked, I don't know how else to say this. She looked like herself. The full version. I know that sounds impossible to quantify. It wasn't a medical distinction. It was just what I saw. She looked up when she heard my car, and her face broke open into a smile that was so complete and so specific, the smile she'd always had for me. That particular one that meant, oh, you, that I had to hold it together as I walked across the lawn toward her. We spent the afternoon on the porch. And then in the kitchen, and then back on the porch as the sun started going down. We talked, really talked. The way we used to when I was in my 20s and would drive down and we'd stay up late at the kitchen table. She told me stories about Nigeria that she hadn't told in years. Stories about her own mother, my grandmother, who I'd never met. She described the market near her mother's house with such specificity, the colors, the sounds, the smell of palm oil in the afternoon heat, that I could almost see it. She asked about my work. She asked about the patients. She asked me with such genuine curiosity, such complete attention, that I talked more than I usually do. At some point in the late afternoon, a quiet settled between us. Not uncomfortable. The comfortable kind, the kind you can only have with someone who's known you all your life. Nadia, she said. Yeah, do you know what I'm most proud of? I waited. Asterisk, that I raised you both to be strong women, she said. Whatever happens. I did that, I said. You did. She nodded, satisfied. She was looking at the street. Her hands were folded in her lap. Whatever happens, she said again. more quietly. Like she was talking to herself, I took her hand. She let me hold it. We sat there until it got dark and I could hear the crickets starting up. And the air smelled like evening, and my mother's hand was warm in mine. And I thought, this is her. This is still her. Whatever they take, this is still here. She died 14 months later. June 2022. Asterisk not dramatically. Not suddenly. She simply declined, as the doctors had predicted. And at the end, she was in a memory care facility. A good one. I made sure of that. Despite Renata's attempt to put her in a cheaper one that was not adequate, and then she was gone. She never knew what I was doing in the months after that afternoon on the porch. I never told her. I didn't want her to spend her remaining time in the middle of a battle. She'd fought enough battles. I wanted to be the one who was just her daughter, right up until the end. Whatever happens. Whatever happens, asterisk the attorney Renata had used was a man named Patrick Hollis. I found this out through his notary stamp on the will. He operated a solo practice out of a small office in Gahanna, Ohio. I'd engaged my own attorney by this point. I'll tell you about her in a moment, and part of what we did early on was research Patrick Hollis. What we found was not dramatic, but it was meaningful. He had a history of preparing estate documents with elderly clients, some of which had subsequently been challenged by other family members. One complaint had been filed with the Ohio State Bar Association in 2017, though it had not resulted in formal discipline, but the real picture of what had happened assembled itself slowly. From multiple sources, over several months, here is what I now believe happened. And I believe it because of documentation, because of Gloria's testimony, because of my mother's own statements on the days she was clear, and because of what eventually emerged through the legal process, beginning in approximately July 2019. Shortly after my mother's MCI diagnosis became known to Renata, Renata began a systematic campaign. I am using that word intentionally. It was not impulsive. It was not a moment of opportunism. It was a campaign. She began visiting more frequently. She positioned these visits as caretaking. She began inserting herself into my mother's finances with the stated purpose of organization. She used my mother's cognitive vulnerability to slowly undermine my mother's confidence in her own judgment, and in mine. She told my mother repeatedly things that created doubt that I had always been favored, that Renata had always sacrificed more, that my mother had always had a soft spot for me that wasn't fair. She had the power of attorney, executed in August 2019, when my mother was still relatively functional but already showing signs of impairment. The attorney she used did not conduct any cognitive assessment before the signing. Asterisk. She then used the POA to add herself as a joint account holder on the checking account. With joint account access, she began redirecting money. We don't know the full extent of this yet. We know that the checking account balance at my mother's death was $1,200, where it should have been significantly higher based on her pension income over the prior 3 years. There was approximately $31,000 that could not be accounted for. The investment account, the $243,000, she hadn't touched yet. The will was meant to handle that. She had the will drafted and executed in February 2021. The attorney came to the house. My mother, by that point, had significant impairment. She believed she was signing something fair. She believed she was leaving things to both girls. She did not understand the actual terms. She could not, by that point, have fully understood them. I learned the complete picture of the checking account withdrawals on a November afternoon in 2021. Sitting across a conference room table from my attorney, Simone Vance. Simone had subpoenaed the bank records. She laid them out in front of me, a spreadsheet printed 12 pages long. Monthly withdrawals, cash transfers, a few large ones that looked like they'd been used to cover the costs of Renata's own home renovation, her backyard project, which had started in 2020. The timing lined up. I sat across from Simone and I looked at those 12 pages. "This is what we have," Simone said. She said it gently but directly. She was not the kind of person who softened things to the point of uselessness. "There's more to find. But this is what we can prove right now." I thought about my mother. About 30 years of saved money. About the textile shop in Enugu where she'd started. About the boarding house. About the yellow curtains she'd made herself. How much? I asked. My voice was flat. Best estimate total. Simone thought. Based on what we found, the checking account, what we know about the investment account, the undervaluing of assets for estate purposes, somewhere between $200,000 and $250,000. $250,000. My mother had built something from nothing. And my sister had been quietly pulling at the threads for 2 years. I didn't cry. I had already cried. I was past crying. What do we do? I said, we fight, Simone said. Simone Vance found me through a recommendation. My friend Joanna's cousin had used her in a real estate dispute and described her as the kind of attorney you want the things are genuinely serious. Joanna said, she's not flashy, but she's like a dog with a bone. She was right on all counts. Simone Vance is 44 years old. She has been a probate and elder law attorney for 15 years. And before that, she spent 6 years as an investigator for the Ohio Attorney General's Medicaid fraud unit. She is black, medium height, natural hair kept short and precise. And she dresses in what I can only describe as expensive minimalism. Everything fitted, nothing decorative. She has a way of looking at you when you're speaking that makes you feel completely heard while simultaneously giving nothing away. She does not waste words. She does not reassure when reassurance isn't warranted. She told me, at our first meeting in May 2021, exactly what I was dealing with and exactly how difficult it was going to be. What you're describing, she said, is undue influence combined with lack of testamentary capacity. These are legally distinct arguments and will likely need both of them. The challenge is evidence. You're going to need medical records, financial records, witness testimony, and ideally an expert opinion on your mother's cognitive state at the time these documents were signed. I have some of that, I said. The medical records from her neurologist, and a neighbor who's been watching this for 2 years. Simone wrote things down. Good. What about the attorney who prepared the will? Hollis? He didn't assess her capacity, I said. He came to the house. That's significant, she said. An attorney who takes a client at home without a capacity assessment. When there are known risk factors, that's a pattern. We agreed on a fee structure. She took a percentage contingency on the estate recovery, which meant I didn't have to produce a large retainer upfront, which I could not have done. I was making decent money as an OT, but decent is not the same as having the liquid capital to fund a probate litigation. The first major step was filing a formal challenge to the will, a caveat, in Franklin County Probate Court. We did this in August 2021, 2 months after my mother's death. The second step was beginning the discovery process. This was slower, more grinding, and far more emotionally exhausting than the initial filing. Renata's attorneys, she hired a firm, not a solo practitioner, which told me she'd been prepared for exactly this possibility, filed objections at every stage. Every document request was contested. Every deposition was delayed. It felt repeatedly like running full speed into a wall. I requested my mother's full medical records from Dr. Adaeze and Ohio Health Neurology. Dr. Adaeze was professional and careful in what she would say. But her records spoke clearly. The documentation of my mother's cognitive assessments from 2019 through 2022 showed a consistent and progressive decline. The assessment from November 2019, just 3 months after the power of attorney was signed, showed that my mother had scored a 21/30 on the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. Below 26 is considered significant impairment. The assessment from January 2021, the month before the will was signed, showed a score of 16/30. 16. At a 16, a person cannot reliably manage their own finances. Cannot reliably understand the legal consequences of a contract. Cannot, in most clinical opinions, meaningfully execute a legal instrument without significant support and explanation. That number, 16, became one of the 2 central pillars of our case. The other was Gloria Teta, who agreed to give a formal deposition. She sat across from Renata's attorneys and she told exactly what she had told me. With the same specificity, the same detail, the same dry certainty. She was not intimidated by the lawyers across the table. She told me afterward, been in rooms harder than that one. Asterisk. What the movies do not tell you about litigation is how many times you are going to wake up at 3 in the morning thinking it's not going to work. I want to be honest with you about this. The process took 14 months from the filing of the caveat to the final hearing. 14 months during which I was also working full-time. 14 months during which I was also grieving my mother, which is a thing that kept catching me sideways. Grief does not wait for convenient moments. It arrives when you're in a grocery store. When you're in a patient session and someone says something that sounds like something your mother would have said. Asterisk. Renata and Derek hired a firm called Whitmore and Sato. They were aggressive. They argued that my mother had been of sound mind. They produced an affidavit from Patrick Hollis saying he had observed my mother to be oriented, responsive, and capable of understanding the document she was signing. They produced a declaration from Derek saying that my mother had always preferred Renata's company. That I was the one who hadn't visited enough? That I was the one who had abandoned my mother to pursue my career. This made me furious. The fury was useful. I channeled it. We retained Dr. Amanda Chu, a forensic neuropsychologist at Ohio State, as our expert. She reviewed the medical records, the neurological assessments, and provided a written opinion on the question of testamentary capacity. It was her professional opinion, to a reasonable degree of medical certainty, that at the time the will was executed on February 7, 2021, Adaeze Okafor did not have the cognitive capacity to understand the nature and extent of her assets, the identity of natural objects of her bounty, or the practical effect of the document she was signing. This opinion, 56 pages, methodical, specific, was submitted to the court. In January 2022. Simone took the deposition of Patrick Hollis. I was not in the room. I was in a waiting area down the hall. She told me about it afterward, with the closest thing to satisfaction I had ever seen on her face. Hollis, under questioning, admitted that he had not administered a formal cognitive assessment prior to the signing. He admitted that his determination of capacity had been based on observation and conversation during the signing appointment. He admitted that he had not reviewed the medical records. He admitted that Renata had contacted him to arrange the appointment, had been present at the beginning of the visit, and had provided Hollis with a summary of what my mother wanted before the meeting began. What was his explanation for why he didn't assess her capacity? I asked Simone. She looked at me. He said she seemed fine. I absorbed that. She seemed fine, I said. He said she was friendly and conversational. My mother had always been friendly and conversational. She had been friendly and conversational on the days she called me by my father's name. She had been friendly and conversational when she forgot she'd made dinner and made it again. A friendly, conversational exterior was precisely what made her vulnerability so easy to exploit and so easy to miss. There was one moment when I nearly quit. It was March 2022. We had just received the defense's response to Dr. Chu's expert report. It was devastating, not because it was correct, but because it was effective. They had retained their own neuropsychologist, a man named Dr. Gerald Park, who argued that cognitive impairment does not automatically negate testamentary capacity, that the legal standard for capacity is lower than the clinical standard, and that my mother had demonstrated sufficient orientation during the signing to meet the legal threshold. He was right that the legal standard is lower. He was strategic in selecting that argument. Simone had warned me this was coming, but reading it in black and white made it feel suddenly, crushingly possible that we might lose. I called Simone that night. "Tell me honestly," I said. "Are we going to lose?" She was quiet for a moment. "We might," she said. "I'm not going to pretend that's off the table. Park is a competent expert, and his argument has merit. But our MoCA score from January 2021 is extremely strong evidence. 16 out of 36 weeks before signing. That's very hard for them to explain away. What's our percentage? I asked. Nadia, you know I don't do percentages estimate. Another pause. Better than 50-50. I believe in this case. I would not have taken it on contingency if I didn't believe in it. I stared at the ceiling. I thought about my mother on the porch. The yellow dress. Whatever happens. Okay, I said. Okay, keep going. In April 2022, we filed the financial exploitation claim separately from the will challenge. This related specifically to the checking account withdrawals, the $31,000 we believed Renata had redirected. During the period when she held the POA, Simone had found a financial forensics expert who had traced several of the cash transfers through secondary accounts. It was not complete. Some of the money remained untraceable. But what could be documented was damning. The April filing changed the atmosphere of the case. For the first time, we were not just arguing over what the will said. We were making a specific financial exploitation claim with documentary evidence. This was not just probate territory. It touched on potential civil fraud. Renata's attorneys called Simone the day after we filed. For the first time in 14 months, they were willing to talk about settlement. The probate court hearing was held on a Wednesday morning in September 2022 in a wood-paneled courtroom in the Franklin County Courthouse in Columbus. I want to tell you what it felt like to sit in that room. The formality of it. The suits and the stacks of paper and the way the Judge Marie Okoye, an experience I appreciated with a complicated feeling, looked at everything placed before her with the same expression of careful attention. Renata sat at the opposite table with her two attorneys. She was dressed in a charcoal blazer. She did not look at me during the opening statements. She kept her gaze forward, or on her legal team, or on her hands. Derek was not there. He had, I had been told, declined to be present in a personal capacity. Though he had been required to give a deposition. It lasted 2 days. On the second afternoon, after both sides had concluded their presentations and the attorneys had given their summaries, Judge Okoye asked both parties to submit any final written statements by the following week before she would deliberate. The decision arrived. 41 days later, Simone called me. It was a Tuesday, mid-November. I was at work. I stepped into a hallway. "We got it," she said. I leaned against the wall. Both the will challenge and the exploitation claim. The will challenge was upheld. The 2021 will is invalid. We revert to the prior testamentary disposition. She paused. Your mother's original will from 2013 divides the estate equally between you and Renata. And the exploitation claim? Settled. This morning, 30 minutes ago. Renata's attorneys called at 9. They agreed to a settlement of $22,000 in lieu of trial on the financial exploitation claim. It is not the full $31,000, but it avoids additional litigation and, frankly, it came quickly enough that I think they were scared. $22,000, half a house worth approximately $187,000. Split equally, half of the remaining investment account. Minus legal fees and estate costs. It was not everything my mother had built. Some of it was gone, and we'd never fully recover it, but it was recognition. It was a court of law saying this document was not valid. This woman was not capable of executing this document. What was done to her was wrong. I stood in the hallway of the Ott clinic and I pressed the back of my hand to my mouth and I breathed. Nadia, Simone said. I'm here. You did good. You didn't quit. We didn't quit, I said. I heard her smile through the phone. Let me tell you what happened to everyone. I will be honest, because this is the part where the neat version of the story falls apart. What happened to Renata? She was not criminally charged. I want to be clear about that because I've been asked about it repeatedly. The civil case concluded with the will invalidation and the settlement. The financial exploitation claim was civil, not criminal. A referral was made to the Ohio Attorney General's Elder Abuse Unit, and as of the last time Simone checked, that referral was under review. I don't know if anything will come of it. Renata has not spoken to me since the week after the ruling. She sent me an email, a long one, in which she told me that I had destroyed our family. That my mother would be ashamed of me, that she hoped I could live with what I'd done. Asterisk, I read the email. I read it carefully, which is not what she expected, I think. She expected it to devastate me. It didn't, because the specific way she phrased things, the specific accusations, the particular reframings told me something important. She still believed her own story. Even now, even after a probate judge had invalidated her will, she believed that she had been wronged, that she had deserved more, that the injustice was mine. That is the most chilling part of this entire story, honestly. Not that she did it. That she still believes she was right. Derek in the deposition
Gave every indication of a man
who had been a willing participant while maintaining the plausible deniability of having never technically signed anything. He had enabled. He had facilitated. He had been in the kitchen at Christmas saying it needs to be done before spring. He will never be held accountable for that specific thing legally. I have accepted this. It doesn't feel like justice. It feels like the way many real outcomes feel: partial, imperfect, real. What happened to me? I received, from my mother's estate, half of the proceeds from the sale of the house on Clearfield Avenue. After taxes and fees and the real estate agent, that came to approximately $78,000, half of the investment account. After the estate costs and my legal fees, came to approximately $89,000, the $22,000. Settlement came to me as well. I have started a dedicated savings account for my own future care. I have created a proper financial power of attorney with Simon's guidance. I have written a will. I returned to work 3 weeks after the hearing. I came back to my patients. To the man learning to button his shirt after his stroke. To the woman relearning how to walk after her surgery. I came back to this work that is fundamentally about restoring dignity. About helping people do for themselves the things they need to do. I do not have a sister. That is the loss I am still making peace with. Not the money. Money is recoverable, slowly. The sister. The relationship that existed in my mind for 38 years as a potential thing. A someday thing, a thing that might eventually become close and real. That is gone. And I am in the complicated position of grieving something that may never have been real, while also knowing that this is how it had to end, what I did not expect. I have slept better since the ruling than I have in 3 years. The body keeps score, and it also keeps relief. Asterisk after the house sold. I was given the opportunity to take anything personal from it. Before the estate clearing company came, I spent an afternoon there alone. Just me and the house and the early October light coming through the windows. I took some small things. I took my mother's recipe book, the handwritten one, 3 different notebooks taped together, Nigerian dishes alongside things she'd learned from neighbors, from television, from memory. I took the photograph of my parents on their wedding day, 1979, both of them young and looking straight at the camera like they were daring it to doubt them. And I took the yellow curtains. She had made them herself in the summer of 1987 from fabric she'd bought at a remnant sale. They were a specific color, not butter yellow, not bright yellow, more like the yellow of late afternoon light. She had sewed them on the old Singer machine she kept in the back bedroom. They had hung in that kitchen for 34 years. They were not valuable. They were faded at the edges from 34 years of sun. The fabric had thinned in places. An estate clearing company would have bagged them immediately. I folded them, and I put them in the back of my car. They hang in my kitchen now. In my apartment in Columbus. They don't match anything. I don't care. Sometimes I stand at my own kitchen sink, and I look at them, and I hear my mother's voice. Not in a mystical way. Not in a way I can't explain. In the very simple way that objects carry the people we've loved. In the way that a particular color, in a particular light, can hold an entire life. She built something from nothing. And then my sister tried to take it. And I fought for it. And I didn't get all of it back. I got enough. I got the curtains. I got the recipe book. I got the afternoon on the porch. The yellow dress? Whatever happens, those were always mine. Asterisk if you've made it this far. Then you know that this story doesn't have a clean ending. There was no dramatic courtroom moment where my sister broke down and confessed. There was no check that covered everything. There was no reconciliation scene where we hugged and agreed to move forward. Real justice is partial. Real outcomes are complicated. What you can control is the decision to fight, and the decision to keep fighting when it would be easier to stop. If you are watching this and you are worried about a parent, an aunt, an uncle, anyone who is aging and cognitively vulnerable, here's what I want you to take from this story. Document. Write down dates, conversations, things that seem off. Don't wait until you're sure. You won't be sure until it's too late. Know what documents exist. Ask your parent, gently, whether they have a will, a POA, beneficiary designations. Know who is named? If they've recently changed any of these things and you don't know why, pay attention. Understand that cognitive impairment creates vulnerability that is invisible to most people. A person can be warm and conversational and kind and still be legally vulnerable. The people who exploit this count on that invisibility. Find an elder law attorney before you need one urgently. Many will do an initial consultation for low or no cost. Simone Vance changed the course of this outcome. An attorney will and to anyone watching who has been through something like this in your own family, I want you to know that what you felt was real. The confusion, the self-doubt, the voice in your head saying, am I being paranoid? Am I being fair? That is the specific texture of this kind of harm. It is designed to make you doubt yourself. You are not paranoid. You are paying attention. Has something like this happened in your family? An estate dispute, a will that didn't make sense, a sibling who saw an opportunity. Tell me in the comments. I read them. All of them. If this story helped you, please share it with someone who might need it. Like this video. Subscribe if you want to hear more stories like this one, told honestly. With all the complicated parts left in. My name is Nadia Okafor. My mother's name was Adaeze. She went by Ada. And whatever they tried to take from me, they never got the part that mattered.